Ready.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody, to Catfish Weekly, along with James Smith. I'm Lyle Stokes and James. We have the one and only doctor with us tonight. Old Doc Lange's going to jump in here for a minute. He's going to spend the evening with us. And, Doc, it is so glad to have you in here with us tonight.
Well, thank you. I enjoy. I'm happy for the invite. I appreciate it.
Well, you know, it's been a little while since we had you on the show, but we spent a lot of Monday nights together.
Yes, we did.
For those of you that are watching the show tonight, and we'll try to go over this a few times, Doc's internet service is a little weak down there in Alabama, so there's a little bit of a delay, and we're going to try to give him enough time in between James and I talking to keep the lag down. But there's nothing we can do about it. You know, he kind of lives out in the boonies and he likes it out there. But James, there's a couple of things I want to go over tonight before we get started. For those of you in the Midwest that knows him, a good friend of ours, Calvin Myers, passed away. He fought his cancer for 6 years, and Calvin left a wife and daughter behind and a mother, and we want to keep him in our thoughts and prayers. It's been a long time since I'd seen Calvin, and I didn't realize that he had got to this point, but I believe he passed away yesterday, and just wanted to let everybody know about that. And also, this is kind of a personal thing. My brother and his wife was diagnosed with COVID-19, and we're kind of concerned about how things go with them. And I understand Kevin Lakin's not doing so good, but he's not feeling bad. But he's feeling bad, but he's not doing too well. So keep that in mind. And James, tomorrow, I believe that Doc told me tomorrow will be the second anniversary of Lynn's passing, and for all of us that know Doc and Lynn over the years, that's something that's very close to all of us. And if we could just have a moment of silence for all these people here, especially Calvin's family and Lynn and Doc, it would be greatly appreciated. All right, folks, thank you all so much.
Yes, sir.
James has been after me to do this show for a while, where he's going to ask you and I questions, and it sounded like some fun to me, and you agreed to it, so I'm going to turn it over and let him get after it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please share this, because there's going to be some great information come out of this tonight that I'm sure that each and every one of us can use. Even the old school people that's been out there fishing for a while, you might want to tune in. This is going to be a good one. All right, let's start her off right. When you decide to go to a lake today, what's the first thing, the main thing that you look at, Doc?
Structure that's on the lake, on a river. I'm looking mainly for structure, and that is on a lake or a river.
But now you're relying on navionics mostly before you ever hit that lake, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Back in the day, all we had was topo maps and maybe a flasher. Not all lakes had topo maps. The lakes that really didn't have power generated on them, you may or may not have a topo map. What was the deciding factor on where you chose to fish on that lake for bigger fish?
Well, back when I started, actually, I never fished any lakes until I started coming to Alabama. I mainly fished nothing but rivers, small rivers and big rivers, the Ohio River, Mississippi, that kind of stuff. So back when I first started fishing, which was about 8 years old, I think I might have started before that. I just don't remember it. Right. But I do remember being 8 years old and my grandfather, taking me out And back then, we didn't have any electronics. What we had was a 4-foot steel rod that had 2 eyes on it, and it had an old Fluger bait caster. And back then, you didn't have lead. Lead was only used for 4 different items back then. It was made for used to make bullets. 2, it was used to make wheel weights. 3, it was used to make window weights on wooden windows. Real heavy weights too. I mean, they were like 10 pounds a piece. And then 4th, I'm trying to think what the 4th. Iron pipe would have a sleeve with a hole in the middle, and you would melt the lead, and that's how they put pipe together. Sewer pipe, even water pipe. That's what lead was using. So what did we use? The main thing that we used back then was spark plugs. Spark plugs was our weights.
Yep. I know people that still use them.
And one thing that I did, yeah. So, but that 4-foot pole had a spark plug on it, and we would drop it down to the bottom and just, keep going until my grandfather.
We lost him.
And we lost him for a minute.
That's all right. He'll be back.
Yep.
Well, you going to the lake, you fished more lakes than he did back then at the time, I'm sure. Y'all had topo maps on some of them, and I'm sure some of them didn't. What helped you choose a place to fish when you got out on that water?
Well, I learned most of what I know from my brother and his father-in-law on the Mississippi River in a 16-foot John boat with a 40-horse motor on it. And I would treat the lakes like a river. I would want that topo map that you're talking about would have the river channel in it. And that's the first place I went to. And I would try to follow that because that's where the ledges was at and the sandbars and stuff. And I used the sandbars because we had sandbars that was on the river. Not necessarily that I fished them, but off the ends of them was usually an eddy where you could go in there and get bait. If the bait was there, the big fish would be there. And I tried to relate the lakes, especially Mark Twain, when I fished it a lot, because it was new and close. And it was the first big lake, really, that we fished. Everything else was small reservoirs for cities, like Bowling Green's Reservoir and different ones where they would make water reservoirs for each little town. But Mark Twain was the first big lake that I ever fished.
Did you ever rely much on your landscape around you, like looking for cliffs and cut off banks and stuff like that would help indicate where a channel might be coming close to the bank, or rocky ledges, seeing boulders up on the bank or anything like that?
Absolutely. You look for all that kind of stuff. The one thing that I always look for that I caught fish on more than any place else was the area where it had a creek inlet or a small river running into it. One of my favorite places to fish, but any rock bluffs, any big boulders, seemed like those places would have, if they had rocks in them, if there was any trees around, the trees was already in there. And the longer that structure's been in there, the better chance you are of getting a fish, especially flatheads.
Yes, and some of your older fish.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, what I looked for back in the day when I was reading topo maps was anywhere that the river or the lake or the river channel in a lake narrowed down, say where a bridge embankment or something is, and then it spreads back out on the other side. You get a current break on the back side of it, but you also get an increase in current right there, even when they're not pulling water.
Absolutely.
People don't realize that. around anywhere that water narrows down and then spreads back out, you're going to have a little bit of current right there. And most of the time you will find, if nothing else, treadfin shad.
That's a fact. That's a fact. And, for years and years and years, I personally didn't know anything about skipjack. It was shad,
Yep.
bluegill, green sunfish, anything like that. And we used to fish them always live until we started. The first one that died, and you cut it in half because you didn't. That's how we found out about cut bait. Run out of bait. Yep. So you'd cut them in half to make them go further. And the next thing you know, you're getting slammed by them big old blues. And back in those days, you knew they was there, but you couldn't catch them consistently. Right. And then things progressed where people was being more consistent about catching them. And pretty soon everybody was on it. New designs, new techniques, new electronics started coming out. And I'm sure when Doc gets back in here, he'll tell you the same thing. When they come out with flashers, that was a game changer.
Yes.
That was a game changer for guys.
For those that could afford it.
Well, yeah, and they wasn't that they was that expensive in those days. Just nobody had any money.
No.
And they didn't make any money.
No, not during the time that they come out.
No.
People don't realize that it ain't, people was working, but they didn't make that much money, and people spent their money on what it took to survive with their household and their family and stuff like that. And most of the time in the top of their toolbox is where they throw their change for their toys.
James, the first electronics that I had for finding fish was a Humminbird flasher, and they'd been out for some time. And I bought one used from a guy who bought a paper graph.
Yep.
And I bought his Humminbird, and in those days I had a 14-foot John boat with a 7.5 horse Sears motor on it, and we took it up to the river, to Salt River, which is what Mark Twain Lake is built on, and it drains into the Mississippi River. And we go up there every weekend and stay on sandbars and camp and set fires out and cook. You take a skillet and some grease, and you ate what you caught.
Mr. Blue said they didn't sell them at the company store.
No. That's a fact. It was stuff like that was hard to get.
Yes.
They really was. Them flashers and stuff was hard to get. And like I say, I never had a paper graph. I think Doc might have had, but I never did have one. But after I got done with the flasher, I got my first. It wasn't very big, but it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. And that's what you had to do.
The Doc is back.
Yep.
All right, Doc. Well, we was at.
Hopefully it's better.
Okay. You must have got closer to the internet box.
Yeah, I'm right on top of it.
There you go. That's okay. What I was asking Lyle was lakes and rivers, and what I was talking to you a second ago was that we had topo maps, and the rivers probably did have topo maps, especially if they was moving cargo up and down them rivers.
Not that I ever seen. I never seen a topo map.
Not topo, they had chart.
Right.
They had paper charting.
Yep.
Was that something you was able to rely on as far as fishing rivers back then?
I could never get them.
No. I didn't get any charting until probably the early 70s, maybe 80s, late 80s.
Yeah.
Right.
Somewhere in that area.
Well, what made you decide to fish the certain places that you picked out on those rivers when you decided to go? Say, you decided, all right, I've done been fishing this hole for about a week or two. Let's move up river. What made you stop in them certain spots back then if you didn't have nothing to look at to choose that area?
Well, mainly, and I think I don't know if I got it all in. My grandfather told me to, when you look at a river and you see the moving water, think of three things: riffle, run, hole. That's how a river, doesn't matter if it's a big river or a little river, that's how they all get formed. The riffle is the shallow area. The run is the flat open area. The hole is just that, a hole, a deep hole. So we would use that spark plug and we would find those deep holes, because very seldom were the fish in the riffled area. They were always in the run or the hole.
Trying to find a current break, right?
Correct. We're trying to find a seam. Mainly, I'm
Right.
trying to find a seam to fish.
Got you.
Yep.
And either
Now,
I can get in the. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Just explain what you was talking about.
Okay, so mainly, once I found a riffle, then I started looking for the run, and then I would look for the seam on the run. Now, the hole would show up as like a flat circle or like an eddy looking thing. That was what the hole would look. That's what you're visually looking for.
Got you. Did you ever rely on any characteristics as far as what was on the land around the area that you was looking for, like steep drop-offs or rocky shores or anything like that?
Well, generally, the rule of thumb is, if you, like on the Tennessee River here, the bluffs that you see, the sharp rock bluffs, are generally,
Yes.
that's almost always deep water nearby. But if you look at it along the bank and you have a sandy looking flat area, that's how it'll come out into the river.
Right.
High red clay banks generally are fairly deep water in those areas.
But you're thinking that the sharp rocky bluffs is going to give you your deeper water.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Now, with that being said, I don't want to mislead people, because man-made lakes can fool you, because there's places on Lake Wiley where you see that pretty rocky bluff right there, but there's a shallow flat right there. And
Yeah.
we got to figuring out that was farmland right there. So that don't necessarily mean that it was actually the river channel, because the river channel was on the other side. That's where the navionics comes in handy to show you if that river channel runs close to that rocky bluff or that steep bank.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay.
mainly, all I'm fishing. It holds true for kind of the Ohio and the Tennessee River chain.
Got you. Now, you fish the Mississippi, the Ohio, and the Tennessee River. When you're making a choice as to run, like I've heard Lyle say this before, and other people say that you find them wing dikes, but not all wing dikes hold fish. Why would you say that would be?
Well, a lot of it is the amount of current that gets whipped around the wing dike. Now, I've seen people, I have a tendency, if I'm on the Mississippi, I like to fish the ends of the wing dikes. I just don't like to get either behind or in front of a wing dike. Just too many things can go wrong. So I like to stay out towards the ends of them. So, yeah. I just, and I mean, and Lyle and Cindy, we fished the Mississippi River Monsters. I got near it was a red buoy, and that thing, I mean, it just literally sucked us right. It sucked the boat and everything right into us, in a matter of minutes. I had everything under control, and then all of a sudden, boy, we're right on top of this red buoy.
Yep.
Cindy had to start lifting rods, or it was going to get we were going to brush right by that thing.
But dang. So that's the mean current coming around.
The fish was there, wasn't they, Doc?
Yeah, they were there, but, again, when you got a lot of current and you have the channel nearby,
those fish will, if you're by that channel, like Doc was saying, them fish will be there. They may not be there right there, but they're close. And if they're not, they'll be there.
But what I was asking was what helped you make that decision is to fish that wing dike as to another one that's on up the river or on down the river?
Well, you go in there and you find them.
Okay.
It's like all the wing dikes don't hold fish. And a lot of it is structure that's behind the wing dike. A lot of it's bait that's behind the wing dike. If you can find a wing dike that's holding bait, there'll be fish in and out of there. And some of them have submerged rock that's out front. You really have to watch fishing wing dikes. And I can appreciate what Doc is saying about he don't like to be in front of them or behind them. Personally, there's a scour hole at the tip of every wing dike, either in or out away from the tip of it.
Yes.
And if you can get where you can line bait up around that and down in it and on the face of it, even on the far end, or walk bait through it, if there's fish in there, and I promise you there will be, you'll eventually catch some of them. And I love fishing that. If there's a lot of bait up on the inside of a wing dike, them fish will be coming up in there to get them. They'll come out of them holes and out of that current, and they'll come in there behind them. But like I say, all wing dikes don't hold bait. There's certain ones that'll hold a lot of fish, and some won't hold any. And the next week it might be completely different. It just depends on where you're at, and like I say, if they're not got bait in there or they don't have any structure, if it's smooth bottom, kind of sandy or something, chances are you're not going to do very good in a wing dike, behind a wing dike like that. But the ones that's got the good scour holes in them with trees and stuff down in the bottom, the place where you lose a lot of equipment, there'll be fish in there. Won't they, Doc?
Yeah, for the most part, right.
Yeah.
Now, on them wing dikes and other places like that on the rivers, even if there's not a wing dike, but you got on the inside of a bend, you get that eddy, that you'll get a back current and you'll get a lot of debris that will drop in there. But from what I understand, y'all don't really fish in that area. Is it because of the amount of debris that's in it, or is it just because you want to fish the hole that's right on the outside leading edge?
I like to stay on the outside leading edge, just for the fact that you're just trying to bump through. Most of the time on the Mississippi, I'm just trying to bump through. So
you haven't been doing it that long. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You bumping through with Lyle's rod, ain't you?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I usually don't bump them kind of places. If I do, I'm like Doc, I'll bump the outside of it. Get as close to it as you dare so you don't lose everything that you own going through there. But if you use your side imaging and down imaging, and you can go through there and you can find and mark quality fish, that's a perfect place to anchor. And that's where old Doc will go in there and jerk out them big old flatheads or a place like that, and he'll have me in the boat and I'll pull them out for him on his rod.
Yeah, we did mark that. I marked that flathead. I turned around and we anchored up. Took us a couple times to get anchored up, but within a few minutes that flathead came. So
yeah.
So now I know that excuse me, a lot of times the way some people fish, it all comes back down to some of the old wise tales, myths and legends of the lakes and the rivers, all the big fishes in the deepest holes and all of that. Do you think that some of the science that we use now came from some of those myths that the reason our electronics was designed the way they were, say, side scan. We know there's fish out there beside us. We started out with a flasher. The flasher read directly underneath the boat. But we always knew that we was missing something over on the sides. Do you think that some of the electronic designs was to help? I'm misinterpreting that question. I wanted to ask you, and I just totally lost what I was going to say about the electronics. We always threw our baits out. Most of the time back there, everybody anchored. When did the bumping techniques and the dragging techniques start coming into play? Was it when the electronics got to a certain point that we could start seeing? Or was it because we figured out if we moved more, we would put more fish on the boat?
For me, it was because I was getting my butt kicked in tournaments by anchoring down. You know, I didn't like to drift. I didn't like to bump. I didn't like to drag. So I had to change. You know, and I had a few people who were really good at doing it. And even though I'm an old guy, you can teach.
We can teach that old dog new tricks.
I tell you what, he picked up on bumping as fast as any. Him and Cindy picked up on bumping as fast as any two people I ever seen. She learned it in about 2 or 3 hours, and he learned it one morning. He called me on the phone. He said, "Man," he said, "I caught my first fish bumping," and he ain't looked back. But Doc has pulled in some giant fish bumping, and I won't. Whoop.
That internet, that young Hughes is a pain in the tail. And it probably just can't keep enough feed in there to keep him live for long periods at a time.
Yeah, I don't know. He's trying to get in. But, Doc and Cindy and I was on the Mississippi River in Memphis one year, and I had a guy sent me a blank. He sent me, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them to test. He thought they'd be good enough to make bumping rods out of, and it turned out that they was okay. Doc loves his. He still got it, and I built one, and we took it down there to test it on the Mississippi River at Memphis. And I showed it to Doc, and I said, "Here, you check this and see if you like it, and then I'm going to play with it a little bit, and then we'll determine if I'm going to be using this blank." And the first day we was out there, old Doc, and we was all just bumping along down through there, and Doc got slammed, and a fish jerked that rod out of his hands. And it went skipping across the bottom of the boat. He was up near the front because there was a little shade up there. It hit the back deck, and just as it went over, he caught the butt cap in his hand. And that's all he got. And he sprawled out across that back deck with his feet going one way and his hands going another way. And all he had was the knob on the back of that rod. And he held on to it and got himself situated and got back in, and he picked the rod up to fight the fish, and it turned loose of him. And he looked at me and he said, "I guess you're not getting this one back." And I said, "And I'm okay with that." I'll never forget that. But old Doc, he grabbed the butt of that rod when that fish jerked it out of there, and I jerked it out of his hand. It was hilarious, and he was having such a time with it. But places like that, those big fish, if you've not ever done it, I tell people all the time. I took some guys out one year that had never bumped, and they wanted to bump down there, and I showed them how to do it. And I said, "I'm going to tell you, if you guys got any paracord or anything, you better tie it on to something, because if you've never had a big fish slam you down," I said, "they'll take that rod. You won't have it. They'll pull it right in the water on if you ain't careful." And they didn't believe me. They didn't lose one. But I know a lot of guys that have had them pulled out of their hands and not ever get them back. So it happens.
Well, I'm sure you get in that rhythm and you'd able to go 10, 15, 30 minutes, maybe even an hour.
Longer.
Up and down through there or longer, and you get into that rhythm, and then all of a sudden, bam, he'll catch you unaware. It'd be hard not to lose a rod.
Well, it can happen. I've put tethers on a lot of them for people.
Yeah, I see people selling them tethers, and I always wondered, why do you need a tether? But it's for bumping.
For guys getting them out of rod holders, they'll, if you put a tether on one and wrap it around a rod holder, they got a half-inch base diameter bottom on them, and you can do it on there because a lot of them fish or hold you down. It takes both hands to get it up, and if your hand slips or you got arthritis in your hands or any kind of corporal tunnel, anything like that, you get it out of there and you got the full force of a 50, 60, 80, 100-pound fish on there. It could just take it away from you if you got that tether, that paracord to hold anything.
Right.
No doubt about it.
Now, Doc, I want to ask you a question. I know you love some flatheads. Of course, we all love chasing them flatheads. But when in your catfishing career did you find out about the flatheads?
Real early. Probably when I was 10, 12 years old, because there wasn't any blues on the river. It was either flatheads or channel cats. So, we caught a lot of flatheads on the small rivers.
Okay.
So I didn't catch any blues until.
Boy's fighting her, isn't he?
Yeah. People, we're trying to bring you a good show. Some great information from these two guys. Please be patient with us. We'll get Doc back in here if he don't get mad and quit trying.
Well, we told him that this may happen, but it's just, he told me today, he said, I live in the boonies. So
right.
I'm sure that he does. And it's kind of like me when we bought this house. We had internet here, but the quality of it was so poor, and now we got good internet. So,
yeah, you can't get much closer than this.
That's a fact. Hey, it's coming back.
Yeah, it's having to go all the way up into the stars and then back down to us. So you're doing good. We appreciate your patience and coming back to us, Doc. So yeah, I didn't understand. I didn't know that the blues was not really that far north for a long time until I started getting on YouTube, and a lot of guys said they still don't have the blues in their area, and that just it kind of blowed my mind.
Yeah, one of the things that people don't understand is there's a hydro dam at Keokuk, Iowa, on the Mississippi River, and there's really no blues above Keokuk. Some of it has to do with cold weather, but they can't get through that dam. They just can't. And
they're not stocking it.
No, they don't stock anything above there. And above there, the winters are a lot more harsh. And the commercial guys caught all what little blues it was up there. And in numbers, they caught them out years ago. And they can't get past that dam. So there's just not any up there like that. But and I understand that if I understood Doc correctly, that's kind of the way it was over there on the Ohio River. There didn't used to be any blues. And I know I remember when Lynn caught the West Virginia state record, and I was shocked. He called me up and I talked to him, and he was telling me the weight of it. And I thought, my God, that didn't seem very big. But I didn't realize at the time that they didn't have hardly any blues in West Virginia.
Dang.
Right. We didn't even see blues on the Ohio River until I started fishing tournaments in the early 90s on the Ohio River in Cincinnati, Ohio. And it was all flatheads. You caught flatheads and channel cats. Very seldom did anybody bring a blue in.
Wow.
Well, some of them, since you're an old-time flatty, maybe you can throw out some of these different techniques of what you actually look for when you started targeting flatheads, since you started before electronics and then the flashers and stuff. I guess because there was so many of them, you fished for them just about anyway, couldn't you? Or was they still more structure oriented?
They were structure oriented. Trees down in the water, known rock piles that, or you get lucky and be out there and watch a barge go down, and then you'd look to the bank and say, okay, that barge is at the fourth tree in that curve right there. So, because when a barge went down on the Ohio, they just let them go. They didn't try to raise them. They just let them go.
Yeah.
Missouri,
Mississippi River, same way.
See, I learned something tonight, and that's the whole thing about this show tonight, guys. Is there's plenty to learn. You got to pay attention to some of the things. Now, was you mainly throwing live baits, cut baits, or a little combination of each when you was, targeting structure?
Back then, we used a lot of live bluegill. Shad were pretty hard to keep alive, so we used them cut.
Right.
And then we used a combination of cut bluegill too.
Got you. Now, Lyle, you're a little bit further west of us, where you got some bigger channels than we do out here. But y'all always had the blues, the flatheads, and the channels in your area, right?
As long as I can remember, you've been able to fish for all three species and bullheads in ponds and stuff. I never caught any bullheads on any of the rivers, but I figure if there was any in there, them flatheads done ate them all up.
So when you was out there and you chose a lake that you was going to go fish, that Lake of the Ozarks, it's hard to, what I'm trying to say is when you went out there, you had to find a reason why you chose a spot to say, if you're going to go find eater fish, what made you choose that certain spot to say, tonight I want catfish for supper. We're going to go here, and I know we can put a boatload of daggum channel cats here. Why would you choose that spot? Or was it just mainly, let's go throw some baits and see what happens?
If I was looking for eating fish on Lake Ozark, Truman, or any of them places, I was looking for a shallow flat, and I call a shallow flat anything 20 feet or less. And if there was bait on it, you just stick some rods out, have your stuff sticking straight down, and just float through there, and you could usually catch a bunch of fish that way. And the reason why we done it the way years ago was because nobody had a trolling motor. So you just let the wind take you, and if you got too close to something, you fired your big motor up and you moved away from it, and then you continue on with your drift. But the shallow flats is where you found eating fish. I wasn't always a deep water fisherman, and Larry Muse told me a number of times he always wants to find the deepest water in any body of water, and that's where he's going to fish. And I don't fish the deep as water as Larry does, but anything that's anywhere from 25 to 50 feet, maybe 60, I'll fish that. My favorite is 30 to 45 feet. And I don't know why that is. I just don't like real shallow fishing. I know there's fish there, and I definitely don't like the deep stuff. But I just like the medium depth water, and it's been good to me over the years. But if I want eating fish, I'll go into a sand flat, and I'll drift. And now that I have trolling motors, I'll pull bait through them.
Well, how many 5-gallon buckets did you ever throw out as daggum drift socks?
Oh, lots of them back in the day. Before I ever knew what a drift sock was, we kept 2 of them. And, of course, I've got hole saws that I use for drilling cars and stuff. And I would drill a bunch of holes in the bottom of them and take the rope and the cords off of throw nets that I had ripped up, and I would tie them around the center, the outside of the bucket, and drill holes in the bottom of them. Sometimes use 2. I never did use over 2 at a time, I don't think, but made a world of difference in those days. That was before I knew that you could get drift socks.
Hey, and the first time I ever seen it, old man, we was on, I think, about an 18-foot pontoon. It wasn't big, and he liked drifting sideways. And he started throwing out a couple buckets out, one out the front and one out the back, so he could drift that boat sideways with the wind.
Right.
And I thought, what in the world are you doing? That ain't an anchor. You know, because I was used to people throwing anchors. He said, watch and learn, son. Put your rods in the water, drop it down to the bottom, reel it up a couple times. And the wind, and it was just a pretty drift down through there sideways, and you was able to have 18 foot of rods out. Well, actually further, because if you stuck your rods out the front, it was the length of the rod plus 18 foot.
Right.
It amazed me. And like you said, we loaded that boat down with some eater channels, and it just amazed me. I was convinced then that now these guys got these drift socks, like they use it to control the like if me with a pontoon, I'm gonna throw mine out the back so that I can drift backwards, or I throw it out the front so I can drift backwards when my rod's out the front of that pontoon, so it'll keep my nose into the wind. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, Doc, do you rely on a 5-gallon bucket or a drift sock? That's what I asked Lyle, how many 5-gallon buckets he threw out as drift socks back in the day.
I used the bucket. I had holes drilled through buckets. And I used 2 buckets, and that locked the boat down.
Yeah.
Now I've got drift socks. Yeah, I use drift socks. I got a 10-foot Easterland sock that I can put out. And
Right.
I've got some 54-inch socks. I don't have to have as big a socks with the boat I've got now as I had with the 240.
Got you.
And mine are 60. I got 2 60-inchers.
Okay. Now, to explain to people what that is really saying, is 4 foot 6 or 60 inch. Is that across the face of it, or is that the length of it?
No, that is the opening that the water goes into.
Right.
So I've got 54-inch opening, and then the Eastern sock is 10 feet. It's 10 foot across. So it's big. It is huge.
Well, that ought to stop
And you gotta have
just about any wind.
Yeah, and I carry it just for emergencies mainly, because if I get caught out there in that really heavy wash with this boat, I can at least put that out there, and it'll get me under control so I can get the boat back in.
That is a very smart safety advice.
It is.
I never thought of it as a safety device.
Yep.
I appreciate you sharing that, Doc.
I've learned a lot since I got down here, because I'm on the water 5 days a week, weather permitting. I'm on the water 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day. Sometimes I work a little bit of overtime, and I'll go as many as 10 hours fishing. If I'm on some good fish, or if I'm trying to learn something. But I mainly fish Wilson Lake, and I stay off of the water on Saturday and Sunday.
Okay.
Unless somebody needs me to go out and help them. But Sunday I don't fish at all on Sunday, except maybe in Sunday evening I will. If we don't have church, then Sunday is strictly God's day.
Right. Yeah, that was some good safety advice, because I never would have thought of it as such. And I'm sure that's why a lot of saltwater boats carry them on their boats, not just for drifting, but in case of them high winds. And people that live or fish a lot on Santee Cooper, especially the lower lake, that is a good device to carry in your boats, guys, because that lake is bowl shaped. and 1 minute the water is glass, and the next minute you'll get 4 and 5 foot rollers because the wind just comes. It seems like the wind comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and it comes quick here. That's the one thing I've learned being out on the water. Within a few minutes, if you feel that cold, it's been 90 degrees almost every day since I've been here. But a few times I've been out there and I'll feel that cold wind come through that. You'll feel that wind change, and then, and I'm starting to pack things up and I'm headed for the thing. And that's one of the main reasons I stay on Wilson Lake, because if I do get in trouble, I can dump off into a creek real quick. Wheeler is so much bigger, and, it gets so much, the waves get a whole lot heavier on Wheeler. Plus, I like Wilson because of all the structure that's on it.
Okay. All right, let's go. I'm going to change it up a little bit. Okay. Go ahead. No, go ahead. What you're going to explain.
One of the things I learned after I got down here is that I love chasing my flatheads. Flatheads have been in my blood forever. And the one thing I found out down here is the flatheads on Wilson Lake do not relate to trees. I was really shocked at that. I've caught more blues off of the trees. The flatheads down here relate to rock. So if you find a rock, generally there's a flathead laying somewhere near that rock. So, since I've got here, I've got 500 waypoints on Wilson Lake alone. Every rock, every tree, anything I find, I'm putting a waypoint on it.
And that is amazing. You could take it. I've seen it done at fish aquariums, and I had fish aquariums. You put one big rock in an empty aquarium, and every fish in there will be around that rock.
Yeah.
And that's about the way it is out there in nature. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to change it up a little bit. Back in the day, spinning reels or bait casters?
Believe it or not, I fished for years with a Zebco 33.
How many times did you have to put new line on?
Well, not so much new line, but you'd get a big fish and he'd snap that line pickup pin off of a Zebco 33.
And they wasn't the easiest on the line. Them old closed-face reels like that was tough on line anyway. But I've got 2 old 33s, the old chrome plated or whatever they were, and it had a little black ring around them. And I put line on them. I thought, perfect. I'm gonna put these and make these up for my grandkids. Well, them son of a guns ain't even got a drag left on them. You just pull the line right off. It don't. I thought these things have done had the line ripped off them so many times that you just set them on the shelf as a good looking as a trophy. Now I do have some 808s that was my uncle's, and I wouldn't use them for nothing. I wouldn't take a chance of busting them. The paint, they are so sun faded that you can take your fingernail and scratch the paint, it'll just flake right off it. But it wasn't paint; it was the color of the plastic. But now, what kind of rods did you use mainly back then? Well, we gone.
James, I want to thank Cat Snatch Fever for his $4.99 donation to us. We appreciate that so much.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that. And there was Sonny Parker said that 33s is the best reel ever made. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the only reel that ever caught more fish than a 33 would probably be a 202. Just because every kid that ever grew up probably had a 202 to catch bluegill and stuff with.
Yes. I'm gonna tell you one of my favorite old spinning reels that I had, and it got stole from me, and I hate that because it was one of my uncles. Was the Mitchell 300s?
Somebody made a post about that in here in 300s. I actually still have one.
They made newer Mitchell 300s, but it just ain't the same
They're
reel.
like them old ones, yeah. It's like the 33s.
No,
them
I've
old
got one,
33s, they were bad, yeah.
Yeah, I had
Yeah.
go ahead.
In 94, that's all Lynn fished with was Zebco 33s. And I was always in a panic every tournament because she was really good at catching flatheads. And I was always worried about, that pin was going to let go. And it took me 5 years to talk her into going with a bait caster. And the first time she put a bait caster in her hand, you would have swore she had been throwing them for 30 years.
Doc, I think I've told you this before. Cindy and I started fishing. When Cindy started fishing, she had 33s, and I bought her some 733s, and she liked them. And the first time or two that we started doing good in tournaments, and you'd pull through a tournament line, and everybody's up there looking at the shit she was fishing with, I'd come in and I said, you're going to have to fish with these bait casters. I said, if you don't ever learn to cast them, that's okay, but they're not going to look at us funny with you going through that line no more. And we still got a couple of her old reels laying here. She liked them because she could cast them, and she can cast bait casters now, but in the beginning, she didn't. But when she started putting 30s, 40s in the pound, 50-pound fish in the boat, them old 733s will only take so much of that. And they're going to start giving you problems. But she caught a ton of fish off of 33s and 733s, but I felt more comfortable, and after she used them, she did too. And we spent hours out in the backyard, her casting them bait casters. Now, she can do it as good as about anybody. Now, she can't throw them as far as I can, but most of the time we're not having to throw very far any.
Yeah, you're on a boat anyway.
Yeah.
Now, the Zebco 33s, for all you people that still chase them ditch pickles, I threw bait. I've been throwing bait casters since Bill Dance first started being popular on bass fishing. Him, Hank Parker, and Roland Martin, and all of them. But when I was going to farm ponds or throwing the Zara Spook, which everybody's calling the Demon Dragons now, that Zebco 33 had the perfect gear ratio for working a Zara Spook. You could work that Zara Spook and make it walk around a stump. You could make that thing walk anywhere you wanted. That gear ratio was perfect for working that daggum Zara Spook. And everybody says, how do you do that? And why you use that old 33 instead of your bait caster? I said, watch it, boys. I could walk that thing around to the back side of that stump and guarantee it when he hit the back side of that stump, it was getting ready to be on. But yeah, you're right, guys. Them old 202s, 33s probably caught more fish than any rod and reel ever made. But back in the day, guys, solid fiberglass rods. Is that what we had?
Yeah. Solid fiberglass. Even I had some steel ones. I had some steel rods.
Yeah.
I've got two different grandfathers that's got the Shakespeare. That's got the Shakespeare bait casters on there that still got the old braided line on them.
Yeah, Dacron.
I wouldn't take nothing for them old rods. I'm gonna put them up. Of course I got them put up, but when I get my building finished, I want to put them up as decorations.
Yeah, we had. There's still a lot of guys around here snagging, and snagging season in the spring is a major deal for them spoonbill.
Right.
I won't eat them nasty things. I don't like catching them. You first little bit you got them on, they fight a little bit, and then they're just like dragging in a log out of the yeah, they're no fun to catch for me. I just don't care nothing. I don't want to eat them, so there's no sense of me going out after them. But there's a lot of those guys that still using those old solid fiberglass rods in anywhere from 5 to 7.5 foot for snagging rods, and they all got wooden handles and stuff on them. There's a lot of them left.
And you can't break them old fiberglass rods.
No, but they'll leave them set in a corner, and they'll warp, and then they'll turn them and they'll warp again. They'll turn them, they warp again. They think they're straightening them out, but when they send them to me to have the guides replaced, and I try to spin them things will jump plumb off of that lathe.
Oh yeah,
because they're bent in every possible angle for leaning up against both. Because those old ones that now the new blanks and stuff. Very few of those will warp like that, but them old solid glass rods, they'll warp in every direction they've ever been leaned on.
Because they didn't have a backbone.
Oh, they had
no backbone.
They all had 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
And now they got a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Sammy Parker wanted to know what your personal best flathead was, Doc. I'm sorry I'm not seeing all these questions, guys. But this show is kind of was set up to do something different. But if I do see them, I will pass them on.
Yeah, I want to apologize because I'm really not looking. I'm trying to help get out some great information to y'all. Sorry if we do miss your questions.
It should be some good quality stuff.
Oh, I'm sure. And I want to bring in some fun stuff too. That's why I was kind of asking about the 33s and the Zebcos and stuff like that. Because, I went first time I ever carp fished with my old uncle. Used to down there where I had my first tournament at. It was fish camp there for a long time, and we would go in and order an order of hush puppies and French fries.
Yeah,
and he fished with those Zebco 808s, and I couldn't tell you how many. And they come with 20-pound test line. I couldn't tell you how many times I seen that old man throw them cotton picking reels on the ground after one of them big old buffalo, just rip everything off.
Yeah,
Take it off to the knot and gone. He'd be so big. He loved buffalo. That's what he loved to eat them.
they're good eating
and good fighting fish too, buddy.
Yep, they are.
That's kind of why I was asking that, Doc. I wanted to hit you funny bone because I know there's some funny stories of fishing with them old reels and stuff like that, and getting your line ripped off of them, and just. But what was some of the biggest fish you ever? Well, he's gone.
He's
We're
gone.
gonna have to call him Jack in the Box.
Yeah, somebody's saying he's playing peekaboo.
Yeah, peekaboo. What's the biggest fish you ever seen come off a 33, Lyle?
The biggest one that I ever seen come off a 33 is probably mid 20s, low 30s. Blue.
Oh, that's a mean fighting fish. And
well, it is on the Mississippi River current. Yeah.
ooh.
Now, my dad caught the biggest fish he ever caught in his life. Now, you have to understand, my dad passed away when he was 51. And before he passed away, my brother took him out. My brother had an 18-foot Elgin or a 16-foot Elgin boat with a 25-horse Elgin motor on it, and as skinny as a bathtub, But he took Dad out and me, and we went out there, and Dad caught the biggest fish of his life. He caught an 18-pound carp, common carp, on the Mississippi River in some pretty hot current below that dam. And that old 33 was a singing most of that fight. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't take it to the knot and leave him standing there with an empty reel.
No, he got her in. It was, like I say, it was the biggest fish that he ever caught in his life, and he was thrilled with it.
I had inherited my grandfather's old Zebco 33 as a solid fiberglass rod, a little old, about 4.5, 5 foot long rod. And Papa only had one eye, and he'd put umbrella handles on his rod. So if he dropped it or something, it would hang on something. And I inherited it, but it was one of the old 33s that had the ball on the back instead of the push button. You would spin it. And I inherited it. First time I got to use it, went out and I put a brim head about the size of your freaking hand on there. We was anchored up right on the river channel. I had rods up in the shallows, and buddy of mine did too, and then we was throwing a few off into the channel, trying to catch them coming and going. I reared back to throw that son of a gun off in there, and Lyle, that zip code 33 still in the bottom of Lake Wiley.
Oh, wow.
I throw rod, reel, bait, everything right off that cotton picking boat, and I ain't seen it since.
Oh, mercy.
I was about sick to my stomach because them old reels are hard to find now.
Yeah.
But it was my grandfather's too, so I guess he wanted that one back. So that's all I know. But guys, there are techniques out there that listen to the old guys out there that's fishing off the bank, that's still putting big fish in the boat or on the bank. And you might look in their boats and be surprised they might still be using an old flasher. They know how to read that water, what to look for, when to look for it, because a lot of these techniques that we discuss sometimes work better in the spring than they work in the summer, right?
Or the winter.
Or the winter, or the fall. Just because they're there in the spring, they might be making that run towards spawning areas, not necessarily to feeding areas.
That's correct.
There's a lot of information, guys, that can be found by listening to some of the older guys, and not necessarily older guys, but people that had fished many a nights or many a days with their grandfathers, their fathers, their uncles, that has been out there on that water a lifetime. Old river, what do you call them? Old river rats, Long.
That's right.
They didn't get to catching them big fish by being stupid.
No, they didn't. And they learned from guys.
Electronics. One of my grandfather's first cousin, I think, he lived out on the Mississippi. And they didn't have electronics. And he said, Papa always told me, he said he always carried one old big stiff rod about the size of a broom handle and a big old bait caster that he couldn't cast. But he always had a 1 pound lead sinker tied to it. And that was his depth finder.
Yep. That's right.
He had colored, I guess you could still find it. He had an old rod that had the line about every 10 or 20 foot was a different color. Right. It changed colors. And that's what he used to find them deeper holes.
Yep. A lot of guys that back in the days before everybody had depth finders, they would mark their line with a Sharpie or something similar to that at 10 foot. And then the next mark would be at 20, and the next one would be at 30, the next one at 40, and however deep you thought the water would be. Right. And that's how you checked it. And where we was at, a lot of time they was using 2 16-ounce sinkers. That way the current didn't take it too far on down below you before it hit bottom.
I see people talking about the old Zephyrs.
Yep.
And old flugers. I still got an old fluger spinning reel that, I'd love to have it fixed. The bells, I guess the spring inside the bells messed up.
Mm-hmm.
One thing about them older spinning reels, they wasn't quite as balanced as these new spinners.
No.
You can feel it. It just about wobble in your hands.
Yeah.
But them Mitchell 300s had the smoothest cotton picking drag.
They did, and they cast like a dream.
They did.
Kevin, I don't have as much trouble with that as we used to, but there for a while when we was doing pretty good in tournaments and hitting a lick every once in a while, every time we'd stop to graph to see if there's any fish in a spot, 2 or 3 people would come by and you see them punching in them things because they was marking spots where we was at, not knowing if there was fish there or not. They just seen somebody that had done some good in them areas, and they was marking every time you'd stop, somebody'd mark a spot just because you was parked there. But we haven't seen that in the last few years, but it used to be terrible like that. Used to be.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's, I guess it comes with the nature, especially if they know you're on a tournament trail and you do pretty good. It's, they going to look for that.
Yeah.
But guys, just because that hole produced today, like Lyle said on them wing dials, just because it produced today, that don't mean it's going to produce tomorrow.
No, it does not. It does not. And I got to tell you, James, you can find fish, and you may have to set up on them fish 3 or 4 times before you figure out how to do it to get them to go. And there's areas that we've fished, anchor fished especially, that you could anchor up on and catch fish, and a guy could come in there right behind you and anchor up 3 or 4 times and never get it right to catch those fish. And there's sometimes it's a technique of setting up on fish to get them to go. And unless you understand that technique,
yes,
or how to do it, you're not ever going to catch them. And it's just like that flathead we caught down in Memphis that day. Doc knew how to set up on that fish, and we wasn't there very long, and we had that baby in the boat.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to he might not understand that you was doing very precision anchoring to put your bait in one specific area.
That's right.
To get that fish to come out. And if he comes up and says, "Oh, I got that hole," I'm not one of those people. I'm not going to chase your hole. But now I might ask you why you chose that spot. So if I run into the same situation somewhere else, that would give me an opportunity to look at it and try to figure out for myself. Guys, that will help you catch more fish than it would if you're chasing people's spots.
One of the things that I will share with people that I've said this before, and some of them may remember it, some of them may not. I never ask anybody where they was fishing.
Oh.
Never. And I think if a guy's catching fish consistently, the better question to ask him is, what kind of structure are you fishing?
Yes.
Or how deep of water are you fishing? Don't ask him for a spot. Try to figure out what he's looking for to find those fish. And if he'll tell you, go try to find something similar to that.
Yes. Because especially like spring, right before the spawn, when them blues are making their long runs.
Yes, sir.
I would say the depth would help you more than anything, because they'll be running channel ledges. And if he says 20 foot and 35 foot of water, that means they probably running on the middle of that channel ledge or on the top of that channel ledge and not on the bottom of it. And if you look at spots, you just pooped out of luck, all I can tell you.
That's right. I learned a long time ago that some people will tell you everything you want to know, but you have to listen really close and then dissect what they say.
Yeah. The only time I might ask somebody where they're fishing at is when they chasing them daggum perch and white perch for bait. Them son of a guns kicked my tail, boy.
Struggle on them.
Them son of a guns, they'll tell me you need to get, they at the mouth of the creeks. I run up down that lake and look at every freaking mouth of the creek, and they seem like them son of a guns done moved to the back of them time I get to the mouth of them.
Cindy and I,
we pass. They going one way and I'm going the other.
We've been to tournaments, and I've had people come up to me at captain's meeting, says, "Where are you fishing at?" And I'll just tell them. Because they don't know if you're telling them the truth or not.
Right.
And I always did.
Yeah.
Chances are they're not going to believe what you say anyhow.
Yeah.
But now if they ask me how deep of water was you fishing, that's the key. Or
yes.
What type of structure are you fishing? Because the key to that is, are you on a ledge? Are you on a channel? Are you on one of my favorite things, and people will pass this up, James, is a channel swing. And for those that don't know what a channel swing is, I'm probably going to get in trouble from some people over this, but a channel swing is where the current seam will go down one side of the channel and cross that river or creek and then go down the other side of it. And they'll use that as a highway, and they'll just follow that channel swing. And if you can find a channel swing, you will catch fish.
Yes, that's I know where there's a couple spots on Wiley like that, and if you can set up a drift or a drag down through there, especially spring, it's that can be and fall too.
That's right.
And you know what? You will always, dang near always, find piles of white perch running that area.
Yep.
Just piles of it.
Yep. That's exactly right. A lot of people don't know what a channel swing is, but if you ever find one, you'll find a lot of fish. And if you ever decide to fish it and you catch a lot of them, you'll look for them. It's just like inlets of creeks and stuff like that. Them fish are there because what comes out of that creek is bait fish or something they want to eat, and they're just sitting there waiting for it to come out. Channel swing's no different.
And I look for ditches at the mouths of them creeks. I look for them ditches, and a lot of times you won't see the fish in them with your graph.
That's right.
They'll be laying in the bottom of that ditch, and that graph might be shooting right over top of that ditch.
That's right.
You'll see the ditch, but you might not see that fish. And if it's a very distinct ditch, you better put a bait in it.
I agree. And I've been to a place on the Mississippi River, and I'm not going to say where it's at because a lot of people know where it's at. But there's a sail that comes off of one of the or off of one of the dams, and there's a trough that runs all the way across over to the Missouri bank. And fish just run up and down that all the time, and it's been there for a long time. And every time we was ever down there was always fish in. You didn't always catch them.
Right.
A lot of times you did. A lot of times you did.
Yeah, and people, there's a lot of debris that washes in some of those because that's slack water, and they know if debris will fall in there, bait will fall in there, whether it's mussels or dead fish or whatever. That means other bait fish are going to come looking for it, and the catfish know that's an easy meal.
Catmandu Outdoors says, hello, everyone. Just been listening. I'm 49 and have used 80% of what they're covering, and it's bringing back memories. Good ones.
Good.
Sonny says that you can look for current seams in the middle of the river. There's something else that a lot of people forget about, and I'm glad Sonny made that up. There's current seams all the way across that river, any river. And those you can tell them because it's a foam line, and it's foaming up because underneath you, what makes that seam is something there's different.
Yep.
There's something different underneath there where it's not a smooth bottom, and if it's different, chances are good that there's going to be some kind of fish there because that is, in fact, structure.
Yes, and it don't have to be a tree. As when we're thinking structure, guys, we're thinking anything that is different.
Right.
Not necessarily a big old giant rock pile or a big tree laying on the bottom. Structure is anything that might hold fish.
That's correct. Hey, Rick, how you doing tonight? That's exactly right. Anything that is different on the bottom of any body of water, stuff that you can't see. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
I'm going to let you try to say that name.
Well, I'm trying to. Tiredor Acro. I'm sorry if I butchered that. I'm trying not to. We appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What about whirlpools? A wise guy that spent a day with Cindy and I in a boat a few years ago said, never pass one up. There will always be a fish in the bottom of it. His name was Jeff Dodd. So you can take that for what you want.
We need to get that man on the show.
I've had him on once or twice. We used to get him on every year down in Memphis. I'll try to get a hold of him. Jeff's a ton of fun in a way. He's like Doc. He's full of knowledge. Great folks. But
what I'd like to do, Lyle, is maybe let's say once a month is let's go old school.
Yeah, we can give it a try as long as I got to think that people enjoy it because some of the stuff that Doc and I talked about tonight, I won't say most. There's a lot of them that never knew about it or never seen it or maybe heard about it from their grandfather or something. And it's not that I'm that old, but Doc is. You know, he's not here to defend himself, so.
Well, I'm sure he's watching though.
We're pretty close though. But
Yeah.
Doc and I have fished together a lot. Well, not a lot, but quite a bit in the last several years. And to be quite honest, a lot of the things that he does is the same things that I do. And we can get in I'm positive that him and I could crawl in a boat tomorrow and it'd be just like the last time we was in a boat. We just pick up where we left off, because the stuff that we do is just pretty much the same, other than the fact that up until now, he probably done more anchor fishing than I done in the last several years. But now that I don't fish the rivers as much as I once did, he probably fishes more drifting and stuff and less anchoring, and I probably do the most anchoring. But this year it's been funny. We haven't been able to. Betty Jean Cross, Tall Betty, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
We ain't going nowhere, Betty. I promise you that. We ain't going nowhere if me and Lyle can help it.
That's right. We're going to be here for a while, and I'm glad you're enjoying the show, Betty. Thank you so much.
But yeah, I mean, and Lyle, I think that, a lot of this stuff, that's why I ask certain questions, is that a lot of it pertain to some of the old myths and wise tales and stuff.
Right.
That stuff comes from somewhere.
That's right.
They come from somewhere, so don't dismiss something that crazy old man sitting down on the dock told you.
That's exactly right. Michael Murillo says that name means bow shooter. Well, that's cool. That's awesome. I used to do a little bow hunting myself.
Didn't know that.
Doc kept talking, or wasn't the one that he kept talking about. He talked about using spark plugs for weights. Yep. I grew up working in garages. I had a 5-gallon bucket full of spark plugs by my toolbox. Kept them for years. And reason I knew about it was when we would go fish the Clarksville Dam, there was always an older gentleman that sat on the bank of the Illinois side of the dam, and that's what he uses. And he would tie them off with 10-pound monofilament, and he'd take a live or cut bait, and he'd wing that baby out as far across that dam as he possibly could, and it would float down there till that spark plug hung up on something. And then the current would keep the bait. You didn't need demon dragons or balloons or nothing. The current would keep the bait up because it was so hot coming out of the dam. And he would try to hit them seams, which is the part between the locks. That's where the seams is. And he caught more big fish than anybody I knew doing that. And spark plugs was, the only thing that he ever used for weights. And I thought, hell, if it'll work for him, it'll work for me. And I started saving them. Yes. And I would share them with people because in those days, working in the garages, we was always getting spark plugs. The cars was not as efficient. They wasn't as clean burning. Some of them used oil. They was all fouled. There was something. Everybody had a spark plug cleaning tool, which is like a mini sandblaster in their toolbox for guys that couldn't afford a 49-cent spark plug. So,
had a lot of spark plugs.
I had a lot of spark plugs, yeah.
And, I used it down behind the Lake Wiley Dam years ago. You can't get that close to the dam anymore. But used to, you could actually throw and hit the wall of the dam, and it would drop right down.
Yep.
And I always use like a Kentucky rig, what they call a Kentucky rig now. That drop leader was always 12-pound line with 20-pound line tied off to it because you knew it was going to get hung. As soon as that hit the bottom, it's going to be hung. And then when something hit, but Lyle, as many years as I fished and done that, I never have got a fish out of that dadgum mess.
Really?
Got tons of hits and tons of runs, but I never could get them fish. They would always knew right where to run, and I'd hang them up and lose them every freaking time. I'd be so cotton picking mad, But what do?
Yeah.
You tie on another spark plug and throwing nothing right back in there.
I'm going to tell you a story, James. Back years ago, the first big tournaments that I was ever in past U.S. cat tournaments was the Cook's Boat and Motor Tournament, and it was held in Louisiana, Missouri, and they give away a new boat, motor, and trailer. And the first year I fished it, I think there was like 70 or 80 boats in it, and the last year that I fished it, there was 107, I think. And in those days, that was a huge number. And the city would almost close up everything around the downtown ramp, and we used all of it for parking lots. And parked in any place that there wasn't a vehicle, there was a boat and trailer in it. And
right.
it went on for a few years. And the guy Cook that originally started that, still in business, Ryan Casey, still gets his boats from him, I believe. But anyhow, we was down there, and we'd been catching fish in front of the dam at Clarksville, just right along, and everybody always locked through and went below the dam, but we'd been knocking them out all week above there. So I come up this wild idea. You couldn't cast or get bait to the front of the dam. Couldn't do it. There's just no way. It's an eighth of a mile. You know, it's 300 or 400 yards down there. No way to get bait down there. And I thought about that and thought about that and thought about that. And my buddy Keith Atkins come down, and we was fishing this tournament. And there was a bunch of guys that I knew growing up that was in this tournament. And we all buzzed down there, and we was lined up in front of this dam because everybody knew that them fish had been biting in there. And there was a hump out there in front of it. And I got down there first. I could have went to that hump and chose to go to the wall next to where the barges lock through. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking about this, and I've got to get a bait down there. I just knew if I got a bait down there to the front of that dam, reasonably close, that I'd do all right. And I had several of the Fluger G30s, and they held 600 or 800 yards of 20 or 30 pound monofilament. And I had a styrofoam coffee cup. And I loaded it up with a big old chunk of bait and a big old sinker, and I put her off to the side, and it floated. And I floated it all the way down there to right in front of that dam. And I could just barely see it by then. And I give it a jerk. The coffee cup was gone, and so was the bait. And it just settled down. I tightened it up, and I fished there for 3 hours and never got a bite. But if you want to get that bait down there, you'll figure out a way to make it happen. We didn't have any RC boats or anything like that.
Hey, but like I say, you don't know till you throw. So you don't know if you don't let it go, do you?
Them guys they started out, they said, hey, you can't do that, you're cheating. I said, you're just mad because you weren't smart enough to think about it. They all wanted to get bait down there too, but they didn't. They didn't think about that. I never done it after that, but for some reason I sat there looking at that coffee cup. And I done drank all the coffee out of it, and I just chucked her all up, set her in there, and when it floated, I knew what we was doing. And we rode her all the way down there, sat there for 3 hours, never got a bite.
Let's say now, if you had your good pellet gun and tied your balloon on there and let that balloon take you, pull it on down there, and then took the pellet gun and shot the balloon, you'd be right in business too.
I don't think I got a pellet gun to shoot that far.
That's a long shot, ain't it?
It would have been that damn it. They cut you off right at the bottleneck where the barges go in or boats go in to lock through, and you can't go past that. And it was a long way down there, but I thought, man, this has got to be the way to get that bait down there, because everybody, and me included, thought we'd been catching them up there at the head of that, and over by that wall you're always hung up, but if you get one on, usually it's a pretty good one.
Right.
I thought, man, if I can get down there in front of that dam, I'll catch me a giant. It didn't happen, but the whole front of that thing, there's probably 30 boats out across there, and everybody was talking about me floating that down there. And this is a long time ago. But you know what? If I wanted bait down there again, I'd probably try her again.
There you go. Hey, you don't know till you throw, though.
That's
That's it.
exactly right.
Yeah. But now you could have waited 5 more hours and might have done that, and you might have been killing them down there doing
You
that.
never know. Well, I wouldn't have been able to do it but the once because I only had one coffee cup.
Oh. Well, if you would have caught a fish with that one time, I guarantee you there would have been a whole sleeve of styrofoam cups on your dadgum boat.
And everybody else's that was down there too. Mark, thank you so
Appreciate that
much.
catfish and crappie.
We appreciate it so much. Thank you very much. We're gonna get Mark on the show with us, James.
That worked.
Let me see if Mark will be on Catfish Weekly, Catfish and Crappie, the 31st of August.
There you go.
And guess what? That's on a Monday night.
That'll work.
Yep. We're going to have a blast with him. Mark is a super nice guy, does a lot of things for a lot of people. And in case you guys haven't seen it, he's got a video that he brought out last week, I believe, of a 57-pound flathead that he caught, I believe. Just an absolute stud. And I was so happy for him. It was a giant fish, and who doesn't like to catch big flatheads?
You're right, Michael Morello. You can use that Patriot bobber right now and go ahead and set your debt before you ever let it go and just let that bobber feed down there to it.
That's a great idea. That is. I can tell you, I got stuff that I keep in the boat. I got a pair of Swarovski binoculars that I keep in there all the time. I've got archery finders to tell distance, how far things are for me, and things like that we never kept in the boat back in those days. Never did. But I keep them with us all the time now, and it's just the way it is. But man, James, I gotta thank you for doing this show tonight. It was awesome having Doc on here, and he's such a wealth of information and a great friend of mine, and I've known him for years and years, and we spent a few hours in the boat over the years and had wonderful times, and I'm glad that he's enjoying his move to Alabama. He gets to fish a lot, and he gets to catch bigger fish. And
well, I know Lynn is enjoying watching him do it.
Absolutely.
And by him getting comfort in that, you can't ask for no more for the man. He earned that right. Lynn wanted him to go where he wanted to catch fish, whether that would have been to Alaska catching salmon or down on Wilson catching big catfish. Wherever he would have been happy, she would have been happy for him. I guess that's the only way to be, ain't it, Lyle?
It is. And like I say, he's such a great guy, and I know that Kevin's going to have him on Palmetto Cats here. I'm not sure, next month, I believe. So that'll be a ton of fun to watch him with Kevin on there. And thank you, buddy.
You have a little bit better internet.
Well, I hope he gets. Yeah, I don't know that he will, but hopefully he gets something done or try his phone. Maybe he'll work that out. But Betty, I'm glad you enjoyed the show. Thank you guys so much. Thank everybody for watching our show tonight. I think we had like 84, 86 people in here watching earlier, and it means the world to James and I that you guys tune in on Monday nights, because let's face it, there's a lot of things you could be doing besides watching him and I talk about fishing.
But I enjoyed it very much having both of y'all on the other side of the camera, I guess is what you would say, because I know both you and him have a wealth of knowledge, and you both enjoy sharing that knowledge. So I wanted to pick your brains.
Well, I'm glad you did. It was a lot of fun. And while I'm thinking about it, James, next Monday night, K&B Anglers is going to join the show. So we had them scheduled up for a week or two to be on here. We're going to go ahead and get them up on here and see if we can find out what it's like fishing in their neck of the woods. And, we might see old Pop twerk a little bit or something. I mean, it's hard to say. We're telling what them two will do.
Can't never tell with Pops. Betty
exactly
G said 92 at one time, Lyle.
92. That's awesome. That's good. Thank you guys so much. SK Crappie was in here. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Chunky Cats, K and B, Palmetto, Chrissy Brown, D's in here. Half Crazy Catfishing, LG Bass, S&K Crappie, Catfish and Pappy. Let's try to hit a few more of these. Muskrat Adventures, Betty Jean Cross, Chris Stegman, Rex Blocker, Stan Smith, Chunky Cats, Catfish and Crappie, Catman Do Outdoors, Matthew Baker, Fishing with the Chad.
Maurice.
What's that?
Maurice is in here. Wampus Cat was in here.
Yep.
Now, guys, there's some people that come in here, you might see them at the beginning, and then you might not see them till the end of the show. It ain't that they got off. Tonight's show was one of them nights where they sat and listened. They took notes.
Well, I hope so, and I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as we did. And I know Doc had a great time doing it. I wish his internet would have stuck with him, but it was extremely enjoyable having him on there, my old buddy. And we'll get him back on here at another time. We'll do another one with him. James, again, thanks so much for the idea. It was awesome. Want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight and watch us. We'll run on about an hour, 35 minutes. Great.
Thank you, Lyle. I enjoyed it. Everybody, we'll see y'all Wednesday night.
Don't forget, Patriot Catfishes America. 7 o'clock Central, 8 Eastern, right here on YouTube.
Got Muskrat tomorrow night. Thursday night, we got James Dockery. Friday night, we got Avid. We got Catfish Headhunter Saturday night. Palmetto Sunday night. And we start the show all over again next Monday. So thank you guys for your support. Lyle, you have a blessed night, buddy.
You too, sir.
Tell Cindy we said hey.
I'll do it.